Hello and welcome back to my Embryo Adoption 2 vlogs, whether you're viewing this on YouTube or my Instagram. Thanks for tuning in and for all of the support and staying up to date. I have some news and updates to kind of share in regards to our second embryo adoption and the process moving forward for a future frozen embryo transfer. Currently, this last cycle that I had to do all of my preliminary lab work again, the exact same labs that women do with all initial infertility testing. I had not had those done since January or February of 2018. And so establishing care with a new doctor before I can even have an intake appointment with him to discuss medical history, my lab results, moving forward with the transfer. Can I do an unmedicated natural protocol, or am I going to require medications and injections, timelines, everything before we can even have that conversation? I had to get all of my preliminary lab work done again, as well as a saline sonohysterogram. And I had one of those done before, along with an HSG, basically procedures, if you can call them that, where they go in and they're doing an ultrasound, but they're filling the uterine cavity with saline or a solution to kind of fill it up, light it up so they can take a look around and make sure everything looks good. So first, on the third day of my cycle, I had to go to the lab, and there was a whole debacle with this. And I at first went on a Friday, which was the day before cycle day 2. I had made an appointment to get my lab work done at a Quest Diagnostic lab and get there, and they didn't have all the information that they needed to be able to run my labs so that they could get the order fulfilled for my doctor. I was a little stressed and I was trying to call the clinic that will be, where the doctor is that will be doing the transfer. Couldn't get a hold of anyone for about 25 minutes, gave up on it, and then ended up, in a way, it was a blessing because 3 labs have to be drawn on cycle day 3 in order to kind of let the doctors look for what they're looking for hormone-wise. And so I went to our base lab, and the woman told me, we need these orders 3 days in advance, so you're not getting blood drawn today either. But the next day was a Saturday, so I was all nervous because their lab isn't typically open. But because it is a hospital clinic, they have to have someone available to draw labs for those people who are in the hospital or there over the weekends. I showed up Saturday. I went, picked up a little phone to say, hey, I have to have labs drawn today. And I was only expecting the 3 cycle day 3 labs because she told me I'd have to schedule an appointment and come back for all the rest. There were 18 labs. 18 labs. And one of those, they told me they couldn't draw because it was a high-cost lab, not being ordered by a doctor at that clinic, so they would not run it. Luckily, I talked with a nurse coordinator later, and I didn't have to have it ran anyways. Just because we're doing embryo adoption, we already have embryos. It would have been a lab that would be important if we were looking to do an egg retrieval and create new embryos, but we weren't. So that was nice. We didn't have to worry about the cost of that lab or jumping through any hoops. But I sat down in the chair, and the lab tech just kind of held up the longest string of labels for vials and said, you have a lot of labs here. Well, they had put all other 17 labs in. So he checked the manual, can I draw all of these labs at once? And then asked me if I was okay with that. I have a history of passing out. I haven't in a long time, but it's more of a mental thing. If I see the blood, if I think too much about it, I will pass out. I warned the lab tech of this, but said, go for it. Let's get this over with. Let's just get it all done today. I don't have to worry about making another appointment. We drew a lot of blood, and I did get a little queasy at the end, and I had to kind of sit reclined for a while with the fan on, but it was all good. I left feeling so much more confident and happy to just have all of that done and over with. It was big check in a box. All I had to do then for the clinic before I could be put on a wait list to speak with my new doctor was get my cyst done, which is the saline infused sonohysterogram. That has to happen between cycle days 5 and 12. So I got it scheduled. I want to say I ended up having it done on 8 or 9. and went, and the first time around, the first cyst I had, unfortunately, it's a very quick, minimal pain type of situation. And the first time I ever had one, it took forever. We basically had to do it twice. I was in a lot of discomfort. And so I was a little nervous going to this appointment, and my husband knew that and was super sweet and supportive. But this one, and I was kind of curious, I was like, now that I've had a baby, gone through all that, things opened up once, I wonder how this will feel this time around. And I didn't feel a thing, and it was over and done with before I knew it. And everything looked perfect. The doctor even said, this was a clinic I'm gonna be monitored at prior to transfer, because we'll be traveling to our embryos, which are farther away. So I had my local clinic do my cyst. The doctor, who's not my ordering doctor, said everything looked perfect and looked good to go. You're ready. And so that was also super comforting. Fast forward, that was a few weeks ago. Yesterday, I decided to call to check in because I hadn't heard anything from my clinic about being put on a wait list. They'd gotten all of my labs and my cyst results back. So just called to check in, because that's something, you got to stay on top of that stuff for yourself. And they did have my labs. They did not have my cysts. I called to make sure that the clinic that did my cysts, they had faxed them, but they were more than happy to fax them again. But in the midst of this, I kind of went through my first little mind games just with infertility than I've experienced in a really long time. The coordinator I was speaking with just, mentioned, yeah, I can see your AMH results. And that was the first one she said. And I was like, okay, interesting, because for those of you who may not know, the female factor for us as to why we did not pursue our own IVF rounds was because I had a borderline low AMH. It was borderline low in the beginning of 2018 during my initial infertility tests. And then 8 months later, the doctor that I first met with when we had moved to Utah wanted to run it again to check it, just because it was low, to see has it changed, because that would have been an indicator to us that, if it was lower, we need to get on an egg retrieval right away. A low AMH does not mean bad quality eggs, but it does mean there could be a low count. As the doctor always kind of put it, I just may not have been born with a full basket. And so those 8 months had passed, and I had it rechecked in October of 2018, and it had dropped somewhat significantly. At least I felt that way. And so at that time, that was what I needed to know it was time for us to close the door on pursuing having biological children. And I think God knew that. He knew, and I had said to him, I had said to God, when we get these results back, if it is lower, that's it. We're not going to try to force and push, and with our circumstances and our personal test results and just all these other things, it would have been a lot more, I think, on my husband and I each individually, stress-wise and emotionally, as well as our marriage. And we just felt so much more peace than when I did get my AMH results and they were lower, that was it. That kind of sealed the deal. And like I've said, I felt so much peace. I still feel so much peace about the decision we made. But something very interesting happened yesterday when I was on the phone with the nurse coordinator, and I said, would you mind telling me what my current AMH results were? Because for me, I've just been curious, it's been 2 years. Has it dropped even more? Because what my previous AMH showed would have been more along the lines of a 35 to 40-year-old woman. And I am now 28 at this time. But when the nurse coordinator couldn't tell them to me because she's not clinical, but a nurse was right there, more than happy to hop on the phone and tell me them. And she told me, so my last AMH in October of 2018 was a 1.044. So anything 1 and above is considered normal, up to 3.5. But once you hit 0.99, it's considered low. And there's an increased chance of infertility. And so I was about that, 0.05 away from low. So that's where for me, I was like, Not that it wouldn't have been worth it to try everything that way for biological children, but for us, like I already said, it just wasn't in the cards for us. So that was a 1.044. And yesterday, the nurse told me that my AMH came back as a 1.7. Substantially higher when the range is from 1 to 3.5. And so the nurse was like, yeah, no, you're well within the normal range. And my head started spinning. Disclaimer, first and foremost, this has not changed anything for us and the peace I feel that we are growing our family and continuing to walk the path and the journey that God has set out for us. But as some women may know, it still plays with your mind, and I'm confused and have questions. And I said to the nurse, I said, wow, 2 years ago it was a 1.04 and today it's a 1.7. It's not like you can't increase that number because it's indicative of your ovarian reserve. So as most people know, every month your ovarian reserve is going to diminish. You're not going to grow it. The nurse said, it could be because a different lab ran the tests, but to me, I'm just still the discrepancies, I feel like just between two different labs running the test shouldn't be that great between a borderline low and a well within normal range test result. I spent a lot of time thinking about this yesterday and a lot of time processing this, and this is what I've come to. Being a believer and knowing how intricately God has woven this journey and story together for us, He knew what I needed 2 years ago when waiting for updated AMH results to feel peace in letting His plan unfold for us. And at that time, I needed to see my AMH level go down. Despite what lab ran the test, etc., I needed to see that lab result go down. And when I did, it gave me the peace that I needed to have to say, okay, we're not going to have a biological child. And at that same time, that was associated with, okay, I'm not going to experience pregnancy, but God. And 2-3 weeks later, my husband found embryo adoption, and we knew I could carry. So we went for it, and we have our son, and now we're pursuing embryo adoption number 2. But what's interesting is now with my AMH showing as a 1.7 being well within the normal range, if I would have gotten that result 2 years ago, it would have been so much harder for me to let go and surrender, and we wouldn't be where we are today. I feel fairly certain of that. And I wouldn't trade where we are today, even though dealing with the emotions that came after that test result were some of the most painful emotions I've ever felt. I'm so thankful that I got the test result I did 2 years ago. And yes, I'm a little confused now as to why my AMH is showing well within normal, meaning I have possibly as many eggs as I should at my age of 28. Now, I don't understand it. I'm confused, but again, I still feel peace because I know we are doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing in growing our family through embryo adoption, and that we have our son Colton, and that who knows when down the road that we could be pregnant again with another baby we've adopted as a frozen embryo. But I feel like that's just, it was a huge reminder to me of how God has orchestrated everything for us in growing our family. And has it been hard and heartbreaking at times and confusing and just crazy? Yes, all of the above, but I wouldn't change a thing. And the fact that my AMH level is showing higher, as the nurse said, yes, we're using adopted embryos, but it's still indicative of me being in a good place hormonally overall, which is good for our future frozen embryo transfers with our adopted embryos. So to kind of answer questions I've gotten since I shared some of this the other day on my Instagram stories, no, we will not pursue IVF of our own after this, just due to our overall infertility diagnoses. And we have our embryos already adopted, and those are our embryo babies waiting for us. And we hope we get to meet them. And I think about those frozen embryos, and I don't know how to say it, but not that my husband and I wouldn't love to have a biological child, but those are our babies. Those embryos that are waiting for us are our babies, and I can't wait to meet them. And so while this result has been confusing and I've reflected a lot as to what it means to me, it doesn't change anything about how excited we are, how happy we are with the prospect of a future frozen embryo transfer and hopefully getting pregnant again and giving Colton a brother or sister. But this is the reality, I feel like, of infertility and the roller coaster you go on of questions that you may have, questions that will possibly always go unanswered, and not understanding everything that you are told or that test results show. It doesn't always make sense, but I continue on in our journey with a super full heart, one that's full of peace and confidence that we're on the journey we're meant to be on. And I'm so excited to keep walking this journey and just seeing what else is going to unfold. So, still waiting for an intake appointment, still riding everything out, but for the moment, everything medically, physically for me is done until we get to the point that we are ready to monitor leading up to a transfer. I don't know if there will be many updates after this until we get to that point, and I don't know if I'll be sharing that type of stuff in real time. Time will tell. But if you have taken the time to listen to all this and watch this, as always, thank you so much for your support. If you want to stay following along with our journey, you can hit the subscribe button. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Comment below if you have questions about embryo adoption, our journey, anything like that. I'm always more than happy to answer questions, share, talk about all of it. Thanks.